Hey, this is Andrew from Precursor Productions, and in this video we're going to talk about a fundamental question: what is mixing? Now this is a complicated process, the whole process of mixing, so I'm going to see if I can break it down to a few simple concepts for you. I think before we get into describing the components of mixing, it's really important just to describe where mixing fits within our music production process. Now, you've probably heard me on other videos describing this as the music production workflow, which sounds like a very technical term, but it just describes the series of steps that we go through to go from the concept of a piece of music ultimately to a finished product that can be distributed and appreciated by listeners. Now, in a nutshell, this process consists of pre-production, which is the process of writing a song or a piece of music and rehearsing it and getting it to the point where it's ready to be recorded. Then there's the recording process, where we actually make a recording so that we actually have something to create and actually distribute. Then the mixing process is where we take the raw materials of the recording that actually sound quite crude and unfinished, and we make them into something that is a little bit more detailed and creative and technically finished sounding. And then the final step is mastering, where we get that final product of the mix ready for distribution. So we fix any blemishes and we basically get it ready to go out the door. Now, within the process of mixing, which fits sort of as the middle part of that music production workflow, there's a bunch of different subsets of what a mix engineer actually does, and I'll try to describe them to you in some plain language words. First of all, the most important concept is the concept of balancing. It's one of the simplest things that we do as mix engineers, but it's actually one of the most elusive as well too. Now, balancing can refer to just basically balancing the levels, literally the volume or amplitude levels of the relative instruments and voices within a piece of music, so that nothing's too loud or too quiet within the recording when it plays back. There's also something that's called frequency balancing, and that relates to things like equalizers. If you've used a tone control like a bass, mid, and treble control on a stereo before, then you know what an equalizer is, and mix engineers use much more sophisticated equalizers called parametric equalizers, which allow them to do very surgical things to the frequency spectrum of each individual instrument and to the mix as a whole. We have other tools which are called processors. One of the classic processors is something called a compressor. That particular tool helps us to control the dynamic range or the variations in volume within an individual instrument part, a group of instruments, or even a mix as a whole. Then there's also a process that's called the processing of effects. Engineers will use effects such as reverberation, such as echo, phasing, flanging, all kinds of neat tools which we can use correctively or creatively. We can use them to help make something sound natural and realistic, or we can make it sound very unnatural and larger than life. Now, these are all part of the process of technically making a recording sound as good as possible and doing creative things that make it sound interesting to listen to. This is what the mix engineer does. Ultimately, the mix engineer puts out a final product which is a fairly finished sounding result, but still needs one more step in the process, and that is mastering, in order for it to be ready for the final distribution. But the mix engineer takes it most of the way there. So if you'd like to learn more about how to get the most out of your experience in the studio, simply head over to precursorproductions.com and sign up for our email list. When you do that, I'm going to send you 20 videos that outline how to save time, money, and get the best product when you're working in the studio. I'm also going to offer you 10% off of any of our professional audio production services. So head over to precursorproductions.com, enter your name in our mailing list, and you'll start getting those videos and the discount immediately.